My name is Don Dagenais. I'm one of the preview speakers for the Lyric Opera Guild, and I'm here to talk to you about the last production of the Lyric Opera season, which is Mozart's Don Giovanni. Now, we all know that Mozart was the greatest musical genius that ever lived. Very few people would argue with that. But Mozart never really made that much money during his music during his lifetime, as the reason was that there were no copyright laws in Europe in the 18th century at that time. So Mozart didn't have any control over his music. Once it was performed, it was in the public domain, and anybody could perform any piece of music from Mozart's if they wanted to. Well, in 1786, Mozart wrote a very popular opera for Vienna called The Marriage of Figaro. And it was very popular there, and especially popular in Prague, in Bohemia, now known as the Czech Republic, not far away. But Mozart made nothing from the popularity of Figaro after the opening performance. Well, the opera manager in Prague, however, had a good idea. He wrote to Mozart and said, "Would you mind composing one for us, since your music is so popular here?" Mozart agreed, and they agreed upon the subject of Don Juan, the famous Spanish lover, whose name translates into Don Giovanni in Italian. So Mozart was commissioned to write the opera. He took a long carriage ride from Vienna to Prague, which can be done by just a few hours today in a bus, but then took about a week, and being jostled and turned and tossed this way and that way in the carriage. He wrote the opera in his head on the carriage ride, and he got to Prague having composed Don Giovanni. And he wrote it down, and it went into rehearsals and was enormously successful. Now, when Mozart got to Prague, he wrote back to friends in Vienna and said, "All I hear is Figaro. The music of Figaro, here and there. Everybody was humming Figaro, everybody was singing Figaro. An organ grinder on every street corner was grinding away the music to Figaro. It was enormously popular." And when Don Giovanni was premiered, also full of great Mozart music, it was enormously popular as well. Now, I want to tell you something about the opening night. The opera was about to open, and there was a party before the opening night, and Mozart was a great party animal. He loved parties. But the manager of the opera house came to him and said, "Wolfgang, we don't have the overture." And Mozart said, "Don't worry, it's written." And the manager said, "I know it's written, but it's only in your mind. We can't perform it from your mind. You have to write it down." So Mozart reluctantly had to leave the party and go upstairs with a stack of music paper and a couple of bottles of ink and a pen and write down the overture to The Marriage of Figaro, to Don Giovanni, which the next morning was taken off to the music copyists so that they could copy down the overture, the orchestra parts, which is what was necessary to get them performed. So the parts were delivered to the theater only moments before the curtain went up on the first presentation, the ink still dripping wet, and the orchestra had to sight read the overture on opening night. Mozart was asked later how it went, and he said, "Well, a few notes slipped under the table here and there, but basically it was okay." And Don Giovanni was an enormous hit in Prague and became so all over Europe and remains so today. But in a perverse sort of way, we kind of have to thank the lack of copyright laws in Europe in the 18th century for the fact that we have Don Giovanni, because it was that lack that forced Mozart to have to write it to capitalize upon his popularity. But it's one of the great works of operatic repertoire. I know you're going to enjoy it at the Lyric, and I will look forward to seeing you there.